Before World War II, Czechoslovakia had been a strong democracy in Central Europe. However, beginning in the mid-1930s, it faced challenges from both the West and the East, and the years of economic growth came to an end with the Great Depression and the rise of Nazi Germany. The Germans and the Czechs did not get along very well. Hitler wanted Czechoslovakia for himself, and everyone knew it. And in Czechoslovakia, their German population increasingly came to support the Sudeten German Party, which received financial and other support from the Nazi regime and won almost 2/3 of the German vote in the local elections of 1935. There were a series of international discussions aimed at resolving the Czech-German conflict that was caused by the Munich Accords, signed by the leaders of Nazi Germany, Italy, Great Britain, and France on September 30th, 1938, stating that the Germans had the right to take over the Sudetenland. This act made the Czech government very angry, and they condemned this German occupation of its westmost territory as a betrayal. The Munich betrayal, as the Czechs thought, effectively meant the end of the democratic interwar Czechoslovakia state. An independent Slavic state under Nazi control came into existence on March 14, 1939, and the following day, as the troops from Germany entered that territory, the remaining Czech lands became the protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia. However, President Benz, who had fled to London, was organizing a government in exile, which gained recognition from the Allies in 1941 and 1942. During this time, there was a leftward political shift in a number of measures. For example, the nationalization of parts of the economy and larger individual enterprises, which caused 62% of the workforce being employed by the public sector. It was also seen to be shifting left because the right-wing parties had been banned. Because of this, the Communist Party was by far the dominant party, winning 38% of the vote in the elections of May 1946, where Klement Gottwald was elected prime minister, who created an alliance with the Soviet Party. After the alliance between the USSR and Czechoslovakia formed, they formed a coalition government with Benz as president and Gottwald as prime minister. However, the Czechs began to see if they could seek aid from the Marshall Plan. The USSR was very against this, which led to them approving a coup from Gottwald to remove all opposition and remove Benz from power, which led to the highly suspicious suicide of the non-communist foreign minister Juan Masaryk on March 10, 1948, and left only communist representatives left, effectively creating a communist state. The coup had 4 reasons for happening. 1. Stalin was paranoid of the collapse of the USSR's control in Eastern Europe. 2. Domestic tensions within the state seemed to be leading toward a civil war. 3. A situation was unfolding in the Yugoslavia, where Tito was trying to gain control, and the Soviets didn't want the same to happen in Czechoslovakia. And finally, 4. That the elections in 1948 showed that the communist vote had decreased by 25%. President Benz refused to sign the new communist constitution and abdicated on June 7, 1948. He later died on September 3rd of that year, leaving the presidency to Gottwald. The new goals for the economy were rigid, centralized, unrealistic production targets that lacked of any correlation between production costs and prices. There was also excessive bureaucratization, incompetent management, and lack of incentive due to the principle of equal wages for blue and white-collar workers, as well as the fact that workers weren't allowed to be fired. There was also a problem with the equipment, considering they dated back to the interwar period. The communist takeover did not appeal to everyone, however. Individuals wishing to go against the presiding regime included artists, intellectuals, and exiled government officials. They were all against the party, and these people were either shamed, imprisoned or censored, and sought to take a stand against the oppressive Soviet policies. Also, to prevent what was happening in Yugoslavia, there were many show trials and purges of such individuals. In opposition, Charter 77, the declaration of several intellectuals, government officials, and Czech Communist Party members, was signed out of concern for basic human rights conditions in Czechoslovakia, as well as basic civil rights. This was the beginning of opposition. However, the document itself states that those who signed simply wished to offer criticism to the government and draw attention to some of the human rights violations, not to become or serve as opposition for fear of being purged or put on a show trial. As the amount of signatures grew, the presiding regime became more and more outraged, promoting that the public disavow the charter. However, the charter ultimately was effective as it led to the establishment of the Committee for the Defense of Unjustly Persecuted, which dealt with violations in Czechoslovakia. Opposition in Czechoslovakia was largely limited to independent and private individuals, aiming to subvert the government and regime. Most popular in the methods of subversion were in the arts, including music and literature. Music from the West had become increasingly popular among the Czech youth, which led to many of the popular Czech artists to sign Charter 77. Additionally, the jazz selection of the Union of Musicians in Czechoslovakia became the refuge for independent and popular music in the country, leading to the section's leader's arrest in 1968. Despite this, however, the section did still remain. However, their influence was greatly reduced. As a result of the takeover, the communist regime remained in power until 1989, during the Velvet Revolution. As Czechoslovakia was the last democracy to fall in Eastern Europe, the West prompted to take several measures in response to the seemingly spread wall of communism. The takeover helped to unify many of the Western countries against the USSR and the Soviets, resulting in the formation of NATO. Additionally, the USSR's argument against the establishment of Free West Germany became completely futile due to the clear and present danger that the Eastern Bloc now served. Additionally, the United States was far more defensive and concerned, prompting clear support for the formation of the Marshall Plan, as well as the NSC's recommendation for a worldwide counteroffensive against the Soviet aggression. However, the regime did not last forever. Communism in Czechoslovakia fell in a similar way to communism in many other Eastern European countries. The Czech government consistently tried to refuse any strong change of any kind and remained very stagnant politically and economically. The main rebellion groups, which consisted of students, had a difficult time coordinating all the people who might oppose the government. So the church was a key and very important part of organizing this. International pressure also helped to keep the momentum for the anti-communist group going, and a general strike on November 27th led to the resignation of Husák on December 10th. The communist regime in Czechoslovakia saw the rise and fall of many leaders in the USSR. After Stalin, each following leader caused the Soviet influence to decrease more and more. In the U.S., however, Truman in 1948 cuts off a huge loan into Czechoslovakia on the grounds that they opposed a rearmed Germany. This led to a huge communist political gain. The Eisenhower administration led the Egyptian-Czech arms deal, which gave Egypt $250 million in arms through Czechoslovakia, which also impacted the Arab-Israeli conflict. Then, the Nixon Doctrine affirmed that the U.S. would move to protect countries it considered allies in case of aggression from other countries. However, this applied to the Vietnam War, not for Czechoslovakia. Overall, Czechoslovakia went through a lot of changes during the 20th century. From its democracy to its communist regime to the fall of its communist regime, Czechoslovakia saw it all and somehow managed to still be one state, until on November 13th, the Federal Assembly passed Constitution Act 551, which settled the division of property between the Czech lands and Slovakia.